welcome everybody to the Zoning Board of Appeals public hearing Tuesday, June 14th. And we have one pending decision before us, and the pending decision is case number 3131, Smithtown Partners, 40 Meadow Lane. So we have 4 board members ready to discuss what we have heard from the applicant and ready to review the standards for a zoning variance that we always review as part of our determination. The first part of the balancing test that we need to discuss and examine is to look at the balance between the benefit to be realized by the applicant against the potential detriment to the health, safety, and general welfare of the neighborhood or community if the variance were to be granted. In balancing these interests, the Board of Appeals must consider the following 5 factors. And the first factor is whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance. So in order, let's start our meeting with a discussion of that factor, whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties as a result of the request by the applicant for a variance that would pierce the sky plane and increase the maximum height of the residence allowable under current code. Does anybody want to start and provide their viewpoint with respect to factor number 1?
I will. I think that the building itself is already higher than, at least appears higher, where it sits up high, and it's a very vertical building. And it is visible from Cooper's Beach parking lot, which is pretty far away, really, when you're driving from west to east on Meadow Lane. Cooper's Beach is deemed to be the most beautiful beach in the United States. So I don't think it's actually wonderful that it would be an even more visible building from that public area. In addition, I don't think it's in the best interest of the area, which is a historic area, but this building is not historic, to further increase the height, which was already created to be higher than the buildings in the area nearby. It is highly visible, and I don't think that's in the best interest of the beach, historic beach area. Nor is it good for the neighbors, but I'm more concerned about the public. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, Alex, if I could just clarify one point with you. As I understand this, the building is already, the residence is already non-conforming, and the request for the variance would be expanding the non-conformity. Is that true?
That's correct. The height of the building allowable was lowered after the building was built. So as it exists now, it is considered legal non-conforming.
Julia, do you have any thoughts that you would share with us with respect to the impact?
The only thing that I'll add to what Susan said, which is really just merely emphasizing the point that she has made, is that the home as it currently exists is already out of scale to the other homes in the neighborhood. And to exacerbate that in any way is not in keeping with our obligation to do the very least, to allow the very least in variances.
Luke, do you want to speak to factor number one, whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance?
No, I don't think there's anything I can add to what Susan and Julia said, except to say that I agree with both of them. Cooper's is just under half a mile away, and you can see the house from there, and you can see it from First Neck as well, as you approach the Meadow Club. And so to make it higher doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
Factor number two that we need to consider is whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than an area variance. And in this context, I believe that the applicant stated clearly that the benefit sought by the applicant is the addition of an elevator. So our question is whether the benefit sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than an area variance. And Luke, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. I think we heard the applicant's architect say they explored it and found that it would have been feasible. I think it still would have required some level of variance, but certainly much less of a request than they're asking now.
Julia, do you want to speak to?
I heard that I had the exact same understanding that Luke just reported, which is that the architect shared that there was an internal, less desirable to the homeowner, but that there was an option inside the home, but that it was less convenient for the homeowner to consider that option. And again, because our obligation is to do the least harm, if there is an inside the home option, I believe that that needs to be, that should be pursued.
That's what I heard. I heard the architect say it was possible to put an elevator inside. I believe he said he didn't think it would look very good, but that's not really our concern. Our concern is spatial issues and how the building presents in the community and in the area. And if there's a way to do it inside, and there are probably other ways to go upstairs, obviously there are, then that seems to be a way to do it that doesn't require a variance.
So the next factor for us to consider is whether the requested area variance is substantial. And I can say with respect to considering whether the requested area variance is substantial, I was concerned that when we look at this, the initial area variance that the applicant is requesting is substantial, but there's also the strong possibility that additional variances might be required if the building department received answers to questions posed to the architect, but the applicant denied providing those answers. We had questions with respect to the height of the building and whether there was a true half story, which might have triggered the need for an additional area variance. And we had questions with respect to gross floor area, if part of the third floor should have been included in gross floor area. So I'll open this question up to other board members. Was the requested area variance substantial in your perspective? Susan, what do you think?
Well, I think 2,000 square feet is a lot of area no matter what. Frankly, thinking about it today, I thought, you know, a 10,000 square foot house, that's 1/5 of it. And this is something they're adding on at the top of a building that's already perhaps too tall. but at least it seems to me that therefore it's substantial. If it were 100 square feet, I might think differently, but 2,000 square feet is a lot of area. That's all I have to say about that too.
Yeah, to clarify, it's 2,240 cubic feet into the sky plane. So we can regard that as substantial. Julia, what's your thinking about whether the requested area variance is substantial?
It is by definition a substantial request. And piercing the sky plane at that proportion is not something that I believe this board has done over the last several years. I'm not aware of any history of piercing it that much.
Luke, can you address whether you believe the requested area variance is substantial, and let us know also your views as to whether additional area variances might have been required that would actually, in a cumulative way, with a cumulative effect, have made the variance request even more substantial?
Well, I do think there's other variances to be requests to be explored on the property. But just leaving that aside and looking only at what the applicant asked for, it's substantial by any metric. It's substantial in terms of just a pure cubic square feet figure. It's substantial relative to the overall size of the house. And it's a substantially impactful change to the character of the house.
So the next factor, factor number 4 in our 5-factor test, is whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district. Luke, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure, that's definitely a subjective point, but yeah, I believe so. I mean, I believe it impacts the neighborhood in many different ways. Most severely just in the impact of the structure itself, the visual impact. As Susan said earlier, you know, the house is really not in keeping with the neighborhood and the historic nature of that neighborhood. And this exacerbates that. I don't think there's any real debate around that.
Yeah, I think all of us, you know, live full-time in the neighborhood and are aware of the size and dominance of this residence relative to other homes in the immediate neighborhood. You know, I go by there almost every day. Julia, do you want to speak to whether the proposed variance has an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood?
I don't actually think I can add anything further than what's already been said.
Susan, did you want an opportunity to say any more, or do you think?
Pretty much same for me. I don't actually know that much. I mean, if you make a bigger building than the runoff situation, and there was a lot of discussion once about this house about the road and the Meadow Club tennis courts and where the water was going to go. But we haven't really discussed any of that. So I'm saying, so that might have been a little bit worse, but I'm not an expert in that, so I don't really want to speak to that. I think in itself, well, I think it was already a too tall building in terms of how it looked, and adding on to it and making it more, I find the top heavy part of it also to be a real, if they were putting it like where there were going to be bushes that were covered up, maybe I could see it, but that's to the contrary. It's the exact opposite. It's as high up and as visible as it could be, as it would be.
So the fifth factor to consider is whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, which considerations shall be relevant to our decision, but not necessarily preclude the granting of the area variance. Does anybody want to speak to whether they believe the alleged difficulty was self-created? I'm not sure in this particular case it's a substantial factor when we weigh this factor against the other four factors, but I do want to give any board member to an opportunity to speak to whether they believe the alleged difficulty was self-created.
Well, I would say that the applicant bought, we were told, the house about a year and 2 months ago. So the applicant had every opportunity in buying the house to understand the conditions of what he was buying. And therefore, if that was a mistake, we've all made mistakes. I don't know, but I think you have to take responsibility when you buy a property for what you bought.
So all of these factors are what we consider when we are balancing the benefit to be realized by the applicant against the potential detriment to the health, safety, and general welfare of the neighborhood or community if the variance were to be granted. So right now, I think we might, unless board members have additional comments, and I'll open it to that possibility, that we might be able to vote tonight on granting or denying the variance request based upon our balancing of the benefit to be realized by the applicant against the potential detriment to the health, safety, and general welfare of the neighborhood or community if the variance were to be granted. Before we put that forward as a motion and a vote, does anybody have any additional questions or comments with respect to case number 3131 40 Meadow Lane?
I do, Mr. Chairman, mostly because this is an area variance request in a residential. This is more of a pro forma type thing, but there is a secret resolution that would be needed. I would submit that by definition, because this is an area variance for a single family residential, it will be deemed type 2 by definition, having no significant impact on the environment. So I would ask that prior to going to whether or not the board votes on the substantive issue, that there be a resolution deeming this a type 2 action for secret purposes.
Julia or Luke or Susan, do you have any other comments you'd like to put forward with respect to this application?
I've been trying to formulate exactly the phrase that I want to use about it, but this house is a vertical house. It's been described as being extremely tall, out of size with the character of the neighborhood. We've talked a great deal about the half story and what variances are being requested. But there's no question that this is a vertical house. And from when you ask the question about whether or not the variance requested was a result of something that was self-created, there is no question that anyone who looked at this home understood that it was a vertical house. There was a lot of up and down, and that didn't just come upon the circumstances. They were certainly pre-existing about this home. It's my only final comment about it.
Susan or Luke, did you want to add anything to the?
No, but I agree with that. I agree with that because, some of the argument by the applicant is, getting up and down the stairs. I'd also think that lots of us have some of these issues ourselves, and that it's not an unusual issue. And I certainly, for instance, at my age, would not have bought 40 Meadow Lane because every time I go up and down the stairs at my own house, which is a very long staircase, I think about it, but that's, that's how I get to the second floor. So I feel it's unfortunate, but certainly not unusual that the applicant did, as Julia said, it screams verticality. In fact, that's sort of the design plan as far as I could tell. So that's what it is. And the applicant bought it. And if the needs have changed, that wouldn't be unusual either. And so I do think it's a self-imposed hardship, if that's what, there was nothing sneaky or secret about it. That's all I have to say.
Luke, did you have anything to add, or I'm going to motion to vote on this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think my thoughts are on the record. When your architect says to you, we can put this staircase inside the house, and you opt to go in a different direction, you are creating the hardship for yourself.
Well, yeah, I mean, more to the point, you are saying that the benefit the applicant seeks could be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue, other than an
Agreed.
So I'll motion that we vote to, in case number 3131, 40 Meadow Lane, vote to deny the variance requests. Can I have a second on the motion to vote on it?
Second.
And all in favor of voting on the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
And then my motion will be to vote to deny the variances.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just ask,
Of course,
would whatever motion the board makes be subject to written decision prepared by council?
very much. So the motion will be to deny the variances subject to written counsel drafted by council to deny all of the variance requested, and that the decision will of course be subject as well to a secret resolution.
And would that then be a secret type 2 determination per regulation, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you.
So all in favor now of denying the variance requests, I will vote aye. I would vote to deny the variance requests. Luke, what's your vote?
Aye.
To deny the variance request. Susan, what's your
Aye.
vote?
Aye.
And Julia, what is your vote?
My vote is aye to deny the variance request.
Okay, so it's unanimous to deny the variance requests in case number 3131, 40 Meadow Lane, Smithtown Partners. And then I believe we have only adjournments, so that may be the end of our public hearing tonight. Is
I
that
believe that's correct, Mr. Chairman.
okay? So I will motion to close the public hearing for the Zoning Board of Appeals, Tuesday, June 14th.
Excuse me, Chair, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I have that there was a request for adjournment on that new one. On the, on Lee Kruder, 3132, there's a request for an adjournment to June 23rd that it's not adjourned. Again, I might have it wrong. Alex, is that correct?
Let me just double check my agenda as well. You're talking about 3132 Lee Kruder, applicant requests adjournment to June 23rd.
Right, but there's no motion on it yet, right?
I thought we may have, but why don't we just, let's motion to accept the applicant's request, even if it's the second time we're doing it. Let's vote to accept the applicant's request in case number 3132, Lee Kruder, 370 Great Plains Lane, accepting the applicant's request to adjourn to June 23rd, 2022. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks, Antoinette. That might have been one where they requested additional adjournment to a further date. I think we had discussed that in the past. Thanks for catching that.
Problem. And the rest is all adjourned.
Yeah, so I'll motion to close the public hearing. Can I have a second?
Second.
And all in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.